Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John McCabe, and I'm an advisor working in the west of Ireland. And today I am joined by Siobhan Ring of ICBF as part of this lunchtime webinar, which is part of the Teagasc Dairy Breeding Week. So Siobhan is going to chat to us today about all things DBI, so Dairy Beef Index, and it's fairly pertinent for the time of year and as we come up to the breeding season. So just to kick it off, Siobhan, I might just get a couple of answers off you for a couple of questions, and then we'll kick off into the slides. So, Siobhan, just as a matter of interest, what proportion of dairy beef cross calves coming off the dairy herd are by AI, and what proportion of them are by Stockbull?
Yeah, so John, so of the calves that would have a recorded sire, only a third are of beef AI bulls. But even like the bigger problem, I suppose, from a genetic evaluation perspective, is actually about half the calves off the dairy cows that are off of a beef bull, like they don't actually even have a recorded sire. So we'll see here kind of as we go into some of the slides later on that like one thing that's really important is the sire and dam must be recorded so that you can get a good indication of the genetic merit and how good the animal will be. So like that's a really important point, that sires must be recorded, and that's not the case at the moment. So yeah, so about a third TI, and the remaining 2/3 are off stock bulls.
Okay, so the stock bull is very important in the whole message, and maybe there's things that we can do to improve the quality of the stock bull over time, and you might get into that for us in a few minutes. And the other question I have for you, and I'm sure you probably will address it, but if you look back over the last, say, 10 years, and you look at the beef semen, the beef AI semen going into dairy cows, what has been the quality of that, what have been the beef merit characteristics of them beef bulls that have been going into dairy cows over the last kind of 10 years, and have they changed in the last couple of years with the advent of the DBI?
Yeah, so not to get hooked up on AI versus Stockbull here, just in this instance, like if we look over the last number of years and the trends that are happening, so in general, so what dairy farmers have been looking for, I suppose, is the easy calving structure staging. And I suppose because they didn't have the tools there and there wasn't the demand to make sure the calf was of better quality, when we select for easy calving and short gestation, the beef merit tends to decline. And that is the trend that had been seen. So the beef merit of the resulting calves and of the bulls that were going into AI, or that were, stock bulls that were in demand, that was kind of deteriorating. Now, thankfully, since kind of the dairy beef index is introduced and there's kind of been an increased focus on improving the beef merit, that kind of has halted maybe, since 2020. The gain has been very marginal, but at least the deterioration has stopped. So we kind of really need to make a big push on actually, starting that improvement now.
Okay, so the tide mightn't have turned just yet, but it's definitely it's peaked probably, and it's ready to go out. So yeah, so maybe just if you could just share your screen there, Siobhan, and get into the meat and bones of your presentation. Just as Siobhan is doing so, just for anyone that's on the webinar today, please use the question and answers function if you want to ask a question of Siobhan or myself.
Okay, so just to start off with the dairy industry, it's, we all kind of know this information, but just to highlight, the importance of, why dairy beef is such an issue now, and it wasn't, maybe 10 years ago or so. It's really coming about by, I suppose, the increased number of dairy cows in the country. So like we've about 55% more cows than we had 10 years ago. So we've gone from 1 million to 1.6 million cows. And because cows are now more fertile, coming from the EBI, cows are lasting longer, there's a less requirement for dairy bred replacements. There's increased interest in sex semen. So it means there's more potential for dairy beef, and there's more potential for those calves on the ground. And so there has been, more use of dairy beef and sires, over the last couple of years, but I suppose we really need to make sure that they're of good quality. But up until recently, their tools didn't exist, I suppose, to, identify the good dairy beefs, the good beef bulls, I suppose, and then, how to make them to the right cows, and how is the potential buyer going to actually know that? So just here what we have is we've 3 tools, all of which have been introduced over the last couple of years. So they take you right through to picking the bulls, to actually selecting, well, which bulls should be used on which cows in relation to sire advice. So I know Dan kind of spoke about that maybe in yesterday's webinar in relation to the dairy, and I know we'll be mentioning it into the regards to beef later on. And then once those cows are mated and the calves are on the ground, well, it's really important, obviously, that whoever's going to be buying those calves, or if you're going to be rearing them yourselves, that it's obvious which calves are the better ones that should be bought, and in turn that feeds back into the cycle of using better bulls again. So to get stuck into nitty-gritty, John, I suppose the first two is the dairy beef index. So what is it? It's basically a breeding goal designed to identify beef bulls for use in the dairy herd. So it's the exact same concept, as you like, of the EBI, but that's obviously for selecting, dairy bulls for the dairy herd. But here we're just focusing in on the traits that are relevant for when we're selecting beef bulls. So it comes down to a breakdown of calving traits, beef traits, and more recently there's an addition of that carbon merit, which we saw introduced to the dairy breeding goal as well. So what it looks for bulls that are easy calving, have a short gestation, and animals, I suppose, that are docile, cold, and they have desirable carcass attributes. So that's what's really important, I suppose, both to the dairy farmer themselves, but also to the breeder who might be finishing or taking them through the first winter or whatever it might be, or whether it's the wearer that comes in. And I'll speak about it now in a minute, but it's this beef merit component, I suppose, in the carbon piece that comes back in later when we look at, okay, well, when those calves are born, the calving is no longer relevant, and we'll be focusing in on that in a second, as regards that is then the important piece when it comes to the calf. So the interesting thing about this, I suppose, is the dairy beef index allows us to look at across a whole range of breeds. So I suppose traditionally there would have been a focus very much on the Angus and the Hereford for use in the dairy herd. But I suppose if you look at some of the lists that are there now on ICBF in regards, picking AI bulls or whatever it might be, there's a range of maybe 7 or 8 different breeds up there. You do have your Angus and your Herefords, but there are other breeds there that will be suitable in terms of calving and beef merit that are really good, I suppose, for the dairy herd. So if we, often a question that's asked is, okay, well, I've been picking easy calving and short gestation bulls before, and what's going to happen if I use these bulls based on, high dairy beef index? So we took kind of, different subsets of bulls. So the first being those that would be top ranked, based on those typical calving traits. And the other would be those that would be top ranked based on the dairy beef index. And if we follow those progeny down, when they calve and when they actually, are finished, we see that they have very comparable calving difficulties. So 1% versus 2%, so very similar difference. 1 day difference in gestation, for a whole lot better in terms of carcass merit. So just for example, so we've got an extra 9 kilos per carcass. We've got slightly better fat spec in here as well. And if you take, say, a farmer that's buying 20 calves, that would result in like a benefit, I suppose, to the dairy producer and also to the rearer or the finisher, in terms of that would be €80 to the dairy producer and over €800 to the finisher. Now you could look at that and you could say, okay, that's very small from a dairy farmer's perspective. But I suppose if we look at the trends that are actually happening now, it's unfortunately got to the stage where you go to the market and you hope that calf is actually sold, or you hope that the exporter is going to come in and take the calf, or whoever it might be, that they'll come when they say they'll come and you can get that calf out the yard. And they're only going to take those calves, I suppose, if they can be sure that those animals are going to, generate a bit of income for those, that they're going to be good animals to take on. So in conclusion, I suppose, look, the high dairy beef index bulls, for very little difference, I suppose, in gestation and calving difficulty, you're getting a whole lot better carcass merit for those animals. So what does it look like? So we've got two bulls here just for comparison. So we've got a Hereford bull here. He's got a dairy beef index of €70, and another bull, Limousin, has a dairy beef index of €110. So there is a €40 difference between these two bulls. So what it means, irrespective of breed, it means we expect an additional €40 profit, more from the progeny of the Limousin over the Hereford in this scenario, coming through a combination of calving, beef, and carbon merit benefits. So not all of that is going to be seen in either calf price or factory price at the end of the day. It'll come from things like such as reduced age at slaughter, which obviously then has reduced feed intake requirements, and shorter gestation, all the little components, I suppose, that add up. So
Siobhan,
yeah.
could I just jump in there? So you could have we'll call it a very high merit Belgian blue beef bull, very high on the DBI list.
Yeah.
And similarly, you could have a very low beef merit Angus, very high on the DBI list. And they both attribute, we'll make it up, maybe €100 of additional profit.
Yeah.
The Angus is all in terms of short gestation, really, really easy calving. And the Belgian blue is all from beef characteristics. Can we, is it about trying to find a balance in terms of calving plus the beef merit rather than one or the other, or is it the bull, a certain bull for a certain situation?
Yeah, it's kind of a mix of what you said there in both terms. So I was listening to Kevin Downing, my colleague, was on there on Monday, and he gave the exact same example, like when you're looking at a dairy herd, and if you look at two herds EBI profiles, you can have the same thing. They could have an EBI of 100, and one herd could be totally made up of milk, more or less, and the other of fertility. So you don't necessarily want a herd that's going to be all milk and no fertility, or vice versa. So it comes to the same when you're picking the beef bulls. So the dairy beef index will rank them in terms of, these are really good bulls, but then it comes down to, picking within, so there's two sub-indexes. So it comes to, your calving and your beef. So you need to make sure that the calving difficulty is right for your herd. Different herds have different levels of tolerance. So what I'd be kind of saying is, look at the bulls that you used last year. Were you happy with those and their level of calving difficulty? And if you were, stick with those kind of bulls. So that's kind of the figure that you want to be kind of looking at. If they were grand, if you had no issue whatsoever, maybe you could try a slightly harder calving bull next year on a couple of cows and see how you get on. So it is all down to the individual herd.
Okay, yeah, that's great. And I think we're starting to see herds really adopting DBI, certain herds in all areas across the country, and we'll start to see that build as people gain confidence in the fact that, well, yeah, we can get a better beef calf and protect our calving performance that we're used to. So sorry, I'll let you keep going now.
No, you're grand. So where to find the dairy beef index? So if this tool works, and how do you find which animals are good or bad? So within the ICBF website, there is a couple of places. So the animal search, and people will be familiar with that from selecting dairy bulls and looking up their figures. Stockbull Finder. So this is kind of like the done deal for identifying if you want to buy a stock bull of any breed, anywhere in the country. And it basically just kind of, gives you their tag number, and you can look up their dairy beef index. Sometimes the breeders put up a picture of the bull as well and gives you the contact details of the farmer to identify. And then we have the active bull list. So this is for identifying AI bulls that rank highly on the dairy beef index. And then, of course, if you're going to the market and you're looking for sales catalogs, or if you're going into a farmer's yard buying the individual bulls, all these figures are available, from the ICBF website. The farmer can print that off and hand it to you on the day, and you can figure that out. And then, of course, on all the AI company material, that's there as well. So from a practical point of view, you ring a farmer and he tells you he's got one stock bull for sale. You say, right, give me his tag number so you can look him up. So you go onto ICBF.com, click on animal search, you simply type in his tag number. This brings you up to, well, what do you want this bull for? So from the beef farmer perspective, they might want them actually, for their suckler cows. So like that's not of interest to the dairy farmers. So you'll be selecting dairy beef index because you want to mate those to your either dairy cows or heifers. This then will bring up the dairy beef index and all the traits down below it. So in this example here, we have the dairy beef index, and then we have two sub-indexes. So John mentioned this here about the two different sub-indexes, so calving and beef. So this guy here, he's kind of okay. He's balanced for both calving sub-index and beef sub-index when it comes to sort of the ranking within the breed. So the further the bar extends to the right, it means that, he's up here in this 5-star level when it comes to the beef sub-index. He's back down at 4 stars when it comes to the calving sub-index, and he's back up at 5 stars when it comes to the beef sub-index as an overall. So then what's made up of those sub-indexes, if you want to drill down even more to look at, the calving difficulty or carcass weight or whatever it might be, that's where this component comes in. So it's just further down in the screen. And it gives you an indication then of his suitability, I suppose, for use within the herd. So this bull here, he's flagged as being high risk for use on dairy heifers. So basically, he's not really suitable for use if you were planning on using him for heifers. But if you want that bull for cows, his figure is about 5% there PTA. So again, if that was a figure you used last year and you were happy with that, and given his high reliability, he wouldn't be a bull that you would necessarily shy away from. Where this bull is kind of falling down on maybe is possibly on his gestation end, so he's carrying 1.6 days, but that wouldn't be considered too bad for that breed. So further down the list here, then again, we have all the beef traits. And again, just as I say, the further the bar extends to the right, it means they're kind of 5 stars, so they're within the top 20% for the breed on those traits. And it's just very easy, I suppose, to see the traits maybe that the bull isn't doing so well on. And if you're happy with that, then he's still, a suitable bull for you to work away with. So the next thing then is your Stockbull Finder. So again, this is on ICBF.com. There's a button there called Stockbull Finder. You click into it. You say you want, to select based on the dairy beef index because it's for your dairy herd. You can select then filter by breed, county, age of the bull, etc. And basically what it does is it brings you up the available bulls. So just in this instance here, it's the second bull is the only one that has a picture up. So I can see his details, and it gives me the contact details and basically all the information I might want to, further progress this if I might think he's a suitable bull for my herd. So just simplify things a bit.
I might just jump in again there. So Siobhan, I've introduced this to a good few farmers in the last couple of weeks, and nobody seemed to know about it. So, and if we think about a third of calves coming off AI and then 2/3 coming off Stockbull, obviously there's a lot of beef, Stockbull, cross calves coming off the dairy herd. So this is obviously going to be a big tool that we need to increase usage of, and it's really useful. I think you can get a good indication of whether this a bull might be easy calving for heifers, and a lot of people are buying, say, Angus bulls or whatever it may be, whatever the breed may be, for cleaning up heifers before they come back to the cow herd. So it gives it's a great indicator, and then added to that, then you get you can look at the beef merits. So I think this little piece here can't be understated in terms of its importance, I think.
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah, absolutely. Because it makes things simpler as well. If you were to, we'll say go on Dundee or whatever, you have to contact the farmer. You might ring 10 farmers you might get 7 tag numbers back, but there's a lot of time kind of gone in that. Whereas, look, this is kind of a quicker approach, I suppose, for the breeders that have these up. So the next piece then, if you're looking for an AI bull, as John mentioned there, look, the numbers are relatively low when it comes to using beef AI in the dairy herd. But certainly the quality of bulls are certainly there, as in, the variation of breeds and the ability maybe to use a possibly harder calving bull on, let's say, your older mature cows, which would be well able for, a higher calving difficulty bull, but it mightn't necessarily result in difficulty if she's the right cow. And then, you know, if you were planning on, you know, if you had small heifers and you want to put those in calf to Angus, there'd be a bull there for that as well. So basically, what's on this active bull list, again, it gives you an idea of the dairy beef index value. So everything's expressed in euro values, the same as it is in the EBI for selecting dairy bulls. And what you want is higher euro values. So whether it's the dairy beef index itself, calving value or beef value, the higher those euro values are, the better. When it comes to calving difficulty, so depending on whether you want the bull for use on heifers or cows, only look at the appropriate value. So when it comes to dairy heifers, there's an additional little indicator there. So it's basically, you know, how risky is that bull for use on heifers? So it goes from low, moderate to high. So if the bull is flagged as low risk on dairy heifers, that kind of signifies, well, if you were, you know, planning on using him on heifers, he is the safest bet. In terms of, because his calving difficulty figure is low, he's got high reliability, and he's a breed that doesn't tend to move very much when he gets more records. So he is a safe bet when it comes to heifers. But if you want to use him on cows, it's the dairy cow figure you need to be looking at. Then when it comes to the beef value traits, again, you can dig into the individual pieces if you like, or as I say, it's all kind of combined within that beef sub-index piece that we mentioned back here. So this beef value piece, the higher that figure is, you know, you're going to kind of get the maximum out of those beef value traits. And then, yeah.
Sorry, Siobhan, if you could just go back to the DBI there. Yeah, so in terms of the beef value traits, the main things we're looking to do is to increase the carcass weight, increase the carcass conformation, but get them finished earlier. Aren't they're the main things that drive up the euro figure for the beef sub-index on the
Absolutely.
DBI? So,
yeah, absolutely.
And do we need to increase that for as we go? Like, do we need to be more ambitious with that figure if we have a lower carcass merit dairy cow?
Yeah, absolutely. I might give you the figures on that maybe later on, but yeah, so the higher the beef value that you can use on your herd, the better your resulting calves are going to be, and the higher this, what we call the CBV value, which is, you know, shown in marks and things as an indicator, I suppose, of the value of the resulting calf. So it's really important to really boost that beef value as much as you can, so long as the calving is tolerable within the herd.
Yeah, and I think most dairy farmers are going to choose the calving, a tolerable calving difficulty and gestation length first. However, the main point of all of the introduction of the DBI and all the focus on it is that you can get both. Isn't that we need to keep hammering that you can get both. You can get your calving, but you can get your beef. Okay, sorry, keep going. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so the next piece then, so once you pick your bulls, and then another tool that is there for you, and when it comes to if you are using beef AI in your herd, there is a tool there, sire advice. So farmers will be familiar for using it when it comes to mating the dairy bulls to the dairy cows. So essentially what it does, and I'm going to skip a few slides here, John, just in the interest of time, but a very simple example. And you've got a small cow and you've got a really big bull. So you can take this in terms of calving difficulty or whatever you like. And if you put that big bull on that small cow, you're probably going to end up with very difficult calving, just in this scenario. However, on the opposite end of the scale, you've got a very big old mature cow. You put a small bull in her who's got really, you know, poor carcass merit attributes. You're going to get a probably fairly average or fairly crap calf. However, if they were mated correctly, the big bull would get the big cow, and you would get the best resulting calf. So what this sire advice does is it kind of optimizes, well, if you've picked 3 bulls, it'll identify which cows should get each of the individual bulls. So, you know, it identifies, okay, well, I don't want a really hard calving difficulty. I want the best beef merit attributes. And I know that as well, you know, first calvers, they tend to have more difficulty calving, and older cows, you know, they're more prone to the likes of milk fever, etc. So that's all built into this function behind the scenes. So you don't need to know, I suppose, the numbers, I suppose, behind it, but that's kind of the concept of how it works. So that's another tool that's there.
Siobhan, without talking about the numbers, I suppose. So, is there a calving difficulty for each cow? Like, does a cow have her own maternal calving difficulty?
Yeah, she does. Yeah, so we never really like talk about it too much because I suppose there's enough figures to be looking at without looking at that as well. So the calving difficulty of, when the cow calves, the difficulty that she incurs is not just due to the bull that was put on her alone. So it's also due to there's a thing called the maternal cow calving difficulty. And basically, if you think about it, it's kind of like the pelvic width of the cow. So what's her ability to actually calve and to open up? And you'd often hear kind of farmers say that dairies can kind of calve anything. They just have this different kind of pelvic width or whatever it might be. And so that kind of feeds in as well for this sire advice. But people don't often look at it, but it is built into this.
Isn't it great what science can do, really?
Yeah.
And this should help over the coming years. But the important part is putting it through sire advice. So thanks.
So the final kind of piece here in terms of these tools is called the commercial beef value. So when you've done all the hard work, you've picked better beef bulls, you've put them on the right cows, and you end up with these calves on the ground. You need to make sure, I suppose, that whoever's going to be buying them, whoever's going to be finishing these animals, that they can kind of acknowledge or reward, and you will say for putting in the hours, for putting in the work relative to a farmer who just left off the next door neighbor's Stockbull or whatever it might be. So this is where the commercial beef value comes in. It ranks the progeny based on their beef merit. So just very simple scenario, all these calves in the pin here inside the mat, and they all look very similar, I suppose, at this point in time. Some of them might be better shine, they might have got an extra couple of litres of milk, but it's kind of been proven time and time again that the look of the calf at such a young early age, it doesn't really reflect how that animal will turn out and how that animal is finished. And so this is where the commercial beef value feeds in. So it basically looks at the genetic merit of those animals and how likely are they to be, have, as you say, to have a heavy carcass weight, to finish earlier, and to have a good conformation. Would be, I suppose, the key things, and I suppose to have reduced feed intake and things like that. So it's helping farmers identify the good from the bad. And as I mentioned earlier, so about half of the dairy beef calves that are born, they don't have a sire. And some of the calves that are registered, they may be recorded to the wrong sire. So this is one tool, I suppose, that at the moment that is restricted to animals that have both a sire and dam verified. So that's basically the calves are genotyped. We know exactly who mammy is and we know exactly who daddy is, to be sure that this commercial beef value can be as accurate as possible. So essentially what it is it's the dairy beef index we were just talking about, stripped of those calving traits. So this, John, I suppose, is where it's going to really feed in that if you picked a bull that had a DBI of, we'll say 100, but 80 was coming from calving, it means your beef merit of those calves is going to be really low. So, €20 versus if you were to pick that Belgian blue that you mentioned, the beef merit of those calves is going to be way better, and the CBV value as a consequence will be really good. So again, the CBV, it's expressed as a euro value, and the traits that are involved in it are, all those beef traits here. So we're looking for the high carcass weight, good conformation, earlier age at slaughter, to be within the specs, so 280, 380 kilo carcass, etc. for the factory, and to finish earlier in life. So just some numbers kind of behind that to get a feel of what it looks like, because this is, I suppose, a really new concept, really, and that farmers wouldn't be too familiar with at the moment.
Sorry, before you do go, Siobhan, so the CBV value is on mart boards currently with any genotyped calves that are verified. So that the landing of the CBV goes well. But the CBV value for, say, Joe Bloggs' herd in Offaly has can he see, or he or she see the CBV value of all his and her calves?
They can. So anyone that signed up to Herd Plus through ICBF, they would be able to, I suppose, get a glimpse of, where their herd is looking like, even if they're not genotyped, just to, kind of see how it's looking. So
Okay.
it's under, so if you log into your herd profile, there's a profile there called commercial beef value. So this is just one herd. So these are some of the calves that were born over the last couple of weeks in the herd. It identifies, so it just tells me these are dairy beef calves. So they have a dairy dam and a beef sire. It gives me their dairy beef index value. It tells me kind of their star rating. So 5 stars means that they're really good, basically within the population of all calves that are available or within that breed type. So we have different breed types. So we've got the dairy beef animal, so dairy dam beef sire, and then I suppose of the other type that's relevant in this scenario is a dairy dam and also a dairy sire. So obviously those animals are kind of they're a different category, different farmers will buy the different types of animals, so they can be kind of ranked within their own group. So
so maybe just to bring that into kind of into farmer speak, like 5-star a crossbreed would be like a very high beef merit bull on a dairy dam, and a low 1-star might be a Jersey cross male, or a poor Frisian, or maybe even a poor Angus if it was very poor on beef traits. That's kind of the range. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. So the range, so if the farmers had these animals genotyped, so this value figure here that I'm showing you and the star ratings, so they would be visible on the mark boards if those animals were genotyped. And so that's there for, I don't know, maybe 50,000 calves are in DNA calf right at the moment. So it's kind of low numbers, I suppose, relatively speaking, for all the calves that are out there. But that's, I suppose, the starting point of what's there. So as you mentioned, these are kind of the range in values. And so, 1-star dairy beef animal could, so you're looking at a range of like -€3 up to €200 plus. So yeah, this would be kind of like, your Belgian blue type calf, and down here would be, one of the poorer animals. It could be of any breed but has really poor beef merit attributes. So, and then how do you achieve that high CBV calf? And so the key thing to look at is, this was something I was doing back, a couple of weeks ago, looking at the individual herds and seeing, okay, well, what's the range in dairy herds in terms of their beef characteristics. So one thing that's available to all dairy farmers is their herd EBI scorecard. So this is mentioned time and time again when we're looking at dairy bulls, but it's also relevant to when we want to pick beef bulls. So each of the sub-indexes are broken down within that. So we get the overall herd EBI, so 5 stars. So this herd is really good on EBI. But if we go down into the individual sub-indexes, and I just highlighted the beef sub-index, I can see they're 2 stars on the beef sub-index. So they're kind of on the poorer end of the scale. And I have their euro figure, I suppose, that's available to them. So if I know they're 2-star on the beef sub-index, I can come across here to this table, and then that gives me an indication of, okay, well, what's the minimum beef sub-index required from the beef bull that I must use to get a quality calf. So for that scenario, they're 2-star herd. So to meet the minimum threshold to be a 4-star calf, they need to have a beef bull sub-index of €78. Now, if I want a really good calf, it must be €174 that beef bull must be at. So not to get kind of really bogged down in the figures, but it's just kind of, John, you mentioned it there about like setting the bar a bit higher than what we have been doing previously. So like, really, if you look at this table, even the best herds in the country, they cannot use a bull that's less than €70 with a beef bull sub-index within that of less than €70. It's just you're going to end up with quite a poor calf. And so there's different levels, I suppose, so basically the higher the beef sub-index that you go, the better the resulting CBV of the calf should be. And that doesn't really matter whether you're, a really Frisian herd or really Jersey herd or whatever it might be. The higher the beef sub-index, the better the resulting calf will be.
So basically, you could have a really good cows in terms of their beef merits. Your dairy cows could have good beef traits, but if you use a bad beef bull, you could end up in as bad a place as a really poor beef a poor beef merit dairy cow. And I suppose one of the things you definitely take out of that table, Siobhan, is that as your beef traits in your dairy herd get worse, you're going to have to be on the upper end. You're going to have to increase the star rating for beef traits of the bull that you're going to be using. So as your dairy cows are not as good for beef, you're going to have to increase the beef traits.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just the same things that would apply for picking dairy bulls. Use a bad bull, you get bad calves.
Yeah.
So just in summary, 3 tools. The dairy beef index is for selecting beef sires for use in the dairy herd. Your sire advice will help you to identify the optimum matings, and the commercial beef value then is what will identify the quality beef stock to buy, or when you're the seller, this is the information you'll be providing the potential purchaser with, and they're going to be looking for those high CBV calves, because that is what essentially is telling that farmer, okay, well, how good they're going to be when they essentially go to the factory. So I'll stop sharing now, Jen.
Okay, thanks. That was very informative. Thanks for that, Siobhan, and really practical in terms of knowing certain things about sire advice and the Stockbull Finder. I'm just going to ask you. We have one question in the question and answers box, and if anyone that's on has any more questions, please feel free to stick them in there. A man up in Sligo wants to know, what criteria does a bull have to reach to be included in the DBI index search? So when you're using the bull, the ICBF bull search.
So he doesn't actually. There's no minimum dairy beef index required. Sometimes the only criteria you might get up is you might get a message saying this bull is not in a herd plus herd. But generally, once the animal is kind of pedigree registered, which is often the case if you're buying a stock bull, they'll often be pedigree registered. You'll be able to find those animals, no problem.
So they all have a DBI.
Yeah,
they all have a figure.
Just in case you're referring to the active bull list, so this would be for the AI bulls. To get on the active bull list, they must have at least 100 dairy calving records. And that's just to make sure that their calving difficulty is kind of, that it stands up, like the calves have been born and the calving difficulty is kind of right.
Yeah. And I think even from my own perspective as an advisor, we have been recommending bulls to discussion groups that have a good few calvings in dairy cows to, I suppose, gain confidence in the fact that, well, we can. It doesn't have to be 2% calving difficulty anymore. We can. Cows are able for a little bit more than that. One more question that's in there is from Tipperary Man: is genotyping of all male calves going to become standard? And how much does it cost at the moment?
And so we probably, irrespective of what breed or gender they are, it's probably going to become standard. And so even if you're reading the journal there last week, so there's talk of 800,000 calves will be genotyped or registered based on the DNA calf reg, over the coming months. So that will probably be the standard. So then that will mean that the CBV will be kind of available on an awful lot more calves, and that you can be sure, I suppose, the sire and the dam are who they say they are. In terms of the cost, so that varies. So at the moment, if you specifically mentioned the male calves there, so if you just want to genotype a one-off kind of male calf, it's €50, so it's quite expensive. But under the DNA calf reg program, I'm not entirely 100% sure of the price, but it's an awful lot less than that. So females are €22 if you're just doing like all your heifer group. But with the DNA calf reg, it all kind of levels out a bit. It's not a higher price for bulls versus heifers or beef animals versus dairy, so it's one kind of flat level.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question there. So at what cutoff point on beef value would you really affect the calving difficulty on a crossbred herd? So I suppose the question being at what stage in crossbred cows are we going to start getting very difficult cows or calvings? Or is the whole point of the dairy beef index to identify individuals that should have good traits as well as good calving, or is there any point at which we would say don't put that into a crossbred cow?
You might have more experience, John, with the crossbred cows now than me specifically. Do you have any?
Yeah. Well, I suppose. Yeah. Well, look, across the board, dairy farmers are very, very happy with calving difficulties up to 4% without thinking about it. And as I think we're starting to see more and more people push the boat out in terms of certain bulls, we call them maybe Charlie bulls or limousine bulls or Belgian blues, on crossbred cows, run through the sire advice system to match it up, as you said, Siobhan, with the easier calving cows, and people are getting up to maybe you're talking 7.5% calving. I don't like to be too prescriptive in terms of it, but some people are happy to use bulls of that type of calving difficulty on certain crossbred cows. But again, it's farm specific in terms of what you would like. But you have to, she would have to be a mature cow to be able to calve that. I think as an advisor, that's the advice we're giving.
And again, it's just looking back at what have you tolerated previously, and if you would no bother, try a bull that's a little bit harder. Once he's reliable, his figure's not going to change very much.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that 4% that I mentioned was just a figure that I'm able to hand out at discussion groups and not be expecting a phone call the following March at 3:00 in the morning, giving out that it was a very hard calving. So, and I think people are starting to get comfortable with higher calving difficulties as they go along. I think as we progress further through using and getting to know the figures, we'll start to see people become comfortable. Any more comments on that, Siobhan, or?
No, but just maybe there on what you mentioned, I suppose, regards like the dairy beef index, will it match them up for you? Like, will it identify for the specific herds? So like if you take it back to maybe, and I just do this because people are more familiar like with the EBI and the EBI active bull list. So when they're picking their bulls, like, we kind of tell people to pick from the active bull list. And once you're picking within that list, and even if you're filtering down through it and you're saying, oh, I'm not happy with this bull for X, Y, and Z reason, that's okay. Once you're kind of picking from, the active bull list, and you're starting at the highest up of the list and working your way down. So once you get however many bulls you feel are suitable for your herd, and you've got a mix of, whatever might be breeds or beef value, whatever it is, you're going to get those gains. And, it might take a couple of years before you really get confidence in it. So I just kind of be saying, really push on the beef value sub-index component. Once you're happy with your calving difficulty, and over a couple of years, try that little bit harder calving difficulty. It might only be, 0.2%. And you might say, okay, well, sure, I know there's no different there, so I'm happy to use them on whether it's my older cows or bigger cows, or and again, it's kind of like picking the cows that you want to use the beef on. Kevin mentioned it earlier. EBI is under 150. The heifer, if you have a Frisian heifer after those, they're probably really not good enough to be bringing into the herd anymore. They're poorer than average. Maybe you've got enough cows that have a better EBI, and so you can get your heifers after those, or maybe you're happy to buy in replacements, whatever it might be. But it comes down to all those different factors, I suppose.
Okay. Unless there's any more questions, I think we might bring the webinar to a close. I just a very quick couple of points to pull out of your presentation there, Siobhan, is we need to start recording more sires of the beef cross calves coming off the dairy herd. So that's one thing that we can all do straight away if we haven't done it. If we're thinking about buying a beef stock bull this year or even next year, be aware of the Stockbull Finder. You can go in, choose your breed, choose your county, and look at the calving and beef merits of stock bulls available. Pick your AI beef bulls with tolerable calving to what you're happy with, but according to the beef merits of your dairy herd. So if you've poor beef merits, increase the beef merits of the beef bull. And look, if we all took on them 4 or 5 pieces of advice in time, we'll start to see a very good quality beef calf coming off the dairy herd. And really, it's about trying to get repeat customers so that people can move their calves off their farms from farm to farm and through the mart in a saleable way. So tomorrow we have another informative lunchtime session from one of Siobhan's colleagues in ICBF, Dan O'Riordan, who was on yesterday. So Dan is going to give us a run through sire advice, how to identify dairy bulls and beef bulls. And there have been a number of changes to the application, to the sire advice application over the last number of years, and I don't think we're all very familiar with it yet. So it'll be useful to get up to date with all these changes. Thank you to Siobhan Ring for that very informative session, and good afternoon.